Let's be direct. Most trading strategies, and that probably includes the one you're running right now, are built on an invisible fundamental flaw. It's a flaw that pretty much guarantees you're going to underperform because the whole thing is based on a lie. Today, we're going to expose that lie so you can stop operating on bad data and start operating based on reality.
All right, to really understand this, we need to go back in time. We're in the middle of World War II. Allied forces have a massive problem on their hands. They are losing way too many bomber aircraft to enemy fire. So the top military minds are given a life or death challenge. Figure out how to make these planes tougher.
So I'm going to put you in their shoes. Here's the situation. The planes that actually make it back to base are covered in bullet holes. You can see the damage is all over the wings, the tail, the main body. Now, you can only add a limited amount of armor before the plane gets too heavy to fly effectively. So where do you put it? What's your call? Now, the obvious answer, right, the one that seems perfectly logical, and it's the one the military went with at first, was to add armor right where the bullet holes are. Makes sense. If the wings are getting shot up, armor up the wings. But here's the thing. When they did that, it had almost no effect. They were still losing planes at the same rate. Their solution completely failed. This is where a statistician named Abraham Wald steps in. He looks at the very same data as everyone else, but he sees the one critical error they were all missing. The problem wasn't their engineering. The problem was their data. They were making a fatal mistake by only looking at the planes that survived. And Wald's insight was just brilliant, completely counterintuitive. He realized the most important information wasn't in the bullet holes they could see, it was in the ones they couldn't. He said, the armor doesn't go where the bullet holes are. It goes where the bullet holes aren't, on the engines. And why? Because any plane that took a hit to the engine never came back. The missing data was the data.
So, what does a wartime puzzle have to do with your trading portfolio? Absolutely everything. This story is a perfect illustration of a dangerous mental blind spot that is running rampant on Wall Street today. It's called survivorship bias. Simply put, survivorship bias is the error of drawing conclusions from an incomplete story. We get fixated on the winners, the planes that made it home, the unicorn CEOs, the stocks that went to the moon, because they're visible. They're the ones everyone talks about. But in doing so, we completely ignore the massive, silent graveyard of all the failures, because they've just disappeared. And the truth is buried in that graveyard. And this bias creates a totally warped view of reality. You know, we hear stories about visionary CEOs who dropped out of college to start a company, and we think that's the path. We ignore the thousands of others who did the same thing and failed. This bias makes stock picking look easy because we only ever see the outliers, the big winners. It leads to backtests that look absolutely incredible on paper but fall apart in the real world. You're essentially building a map to a treasure that's based only on the stories of a few people who got lucky. So let me be really clear about this. When you run a backtest on a typical list of stocks, say the current components of the S&P 500, you are not analyzing the market. You're analyzing a curated museum of winners. You're only looking at the companies that were strong enough and lucky enough to survive until today. And that incomplete picture, it is actively sabotaging your results. Now, this isn't just some interesting academic theory. This bias has a real, quantifiable, and frankly, a devastating cost to your performance. So let's stop talking theory and look at the hard numbers. Let's see what this actually looks like in practice. Okay, so here we have a tale of two backtests. We're looking at the exact same momentum strategy, run from 1993 to 2020. On the left, you've got the results using a standard, biased dataset, the kind most people use, the one that only includes the survivors. On the right, you've got the results from a professional, unbiased dataset that includes all the companies that went bankrupt, got delisted, or merged. Same strategy, two completely different realities. Just look at that. It's shocking. The biased backtest for the NASDAQ 100 shows this incredible 46% compound annual growth rate. It looks like a holy grail. But when you introduce reality, when you include the failures, that number gets slashed down to 16.4%. Look at the S&P 100. It goes from 26% all the way down to 12.2%. You see, most of the alpha, most of that incredible performance, it was a ghost. It was just an illusion created by bad data. But this is where it gets truly dangerous, because inflated returns are one problem, but hidden risk, that's what kills you. The biased backtest showed a max drawdown of 41%. Okay, that's painful, for sure, but you might survive it. The unbiased real-world backtest, the drawdown more than doubled to a catastrophic negative 83%. Let's just let that number sink in for a second. Negative 83%. An 83% drawdown isn't a setback. It's an account-destroying, career-ending event. It's game over. And that level of risk was completely invisible in the flawed analysis. This is the real cost of operating with a blind spot. This is what happens when you don't armor the engines.
So how do professional operators solve for this? It's not about finding some secret magic strategy. It's about implementing a professional-grade operating system. And that is the absolute core of the STOA framework, a structured operating architecture that is specifically designed to eliminate these exact kinds of devastating flaws from your process. Here is how you build that professional process. Step 1, you must use comprehensive survivorship bias-free datasets. This is completely non-negotiable. Step 2, you have to analyze the entire population, the winners and the losers, to see what really works. Step 3, your work must account for the fact that indices change. The S&P 500 of today is not the S&P 500 of 1995. And finally, step 4, this all gets documented into a repeatable process. You stop being an amateur chasing random ideas, and you become a professional who executes a process. Look, understanding this isn't just some neat mental model. As a founder, a CEO, an operator in these markets, knowing this gives you a mandate to reject flawed amateur analysis and to hold yourself and your entire process to a much higher standard. So I'm going to leave you with this one question. I want you to take a hard, honest look at your own process. Are you building your strategy on the solid foundation of market reality, the one that includes all the failures? Or are you basing your entire financial future on a ghost story told only by the lucky survivors? If you've made it this far, you're not just curious, you're serious. And that's exactly who STOA was built for. Here's the deal. We don't accept everyone. We run on an application-only system because we only work with people who are ready to operate at the next level. So if you want to stop wasting hours chasing noise and instead run a proven, documented process that gets results in less than 90 minutes a day, apply now. There are limited seats, and once they're filled, they're gone for the quarter. Click the link in the description, fill out the short application, and let's see if you're a fit.